Two heads. One day, a taxi driver received a call from a man at a hotel in the center of the city. He wanted to be picked up and transported to the airport. When the taxi driver arrived at the hotel, he had to wait more than an hour for the man to come out. When the passenger emerged from the hotel, he was carrying two large bags. Always friendly and willing to assist, the taxi driver got out and tried to help the man with his bags. To his surprise, the man refused and insisted on loading the bags into the trunk of the taxi by himself. Just then, the taxi driver noticed a horrible smell. It was the stench of rot and decay, and it was coming from the bags. When he got back in the taxi, he noticed something else that was strange. The passenger seemed very nervous, and he kept looking furtively over his shoulder. The taxi driver followed the route to the airport. On the way, the suspicious passenger asked him to stop at the corner because he wanted to make a phone call. The driver obeyed and waited patiently while the passenger got out. As he sat in the taxi, the driver could smell the terrible stench coming from the trunk. The odor of decomposition was unmistakable. The nervous passenger returned and got into the back of the cab. The driver looked in the rearview mirror and noticed that the passenger was eyeing him suspiciously. By the time they reached the airport, the passenger was extremely nervous and sweating profusely. He asked the taxi driver to wait for him in the parking lot because he was worried that he may have missed his plane. Then, the passenger got out of the taxi and hurried off. The taxi driver was sitting there for a few minutes when he suddenly realized that the passenger had forgotten to take his bags with him. They were still in the trunk of the car. The smell was becoming so terrible that people who were passing by the taxi had to hold their noses. The driver realized that the mysterious passenger was not going to return and decided to find out what was in the bags. He got out of the car, and when he opened the trunk, he was almost overpowered by the terrible smell. With trembling hands, he opened the bags, and inside he found two rotting heads. A head of lettuce and a head of cauliflower. The Black Cat's Message. One day, a big yellow cat appeared outside our home. The neighbors didn't like it. They thought it was a witch. But my roommate and I thought it was a sweet cat, so we kept it. Months later, it was such a lovely day that I decided to walk home from work, even though it was getting dark. As I rounded a corner, I saw a group of black cats standing in the middle of the road. As I drew nearer, I saw that they were gathered around a dead cat. It was sad, but they were nearly invisible in the growing dark, and I'm sure it was an accident. Then one of the cats called out, "Sir, please tell Aunt Con that Polly Grundy is dead." My mouth dropped in shock. I shook my head hard, not believing my ears. Cats don't talk. I hurried past the little group, carefully looking the other way. I must have been working too hard, I thought. But I couldn't help wondering who Aunt Con might be, and why did the cat want me to tell her that Polly Grundy was dead? I got a ways down the street, and was just managing to convince myself it was all a figment of my imagination, when suddenly I was confronted by a small black cat. It was standing directly in front of me. I stopped and looked down at it. It looked back at me. "I have a message for Aunt Con," the cat said. "Tell her that Polly Grundy is dead." The cat walked past me before I could even doubt my sanity. Once I did, I hurried away as fast as I could. Around me, the woods were getting darker and darker. I did not want to stay in that wood with those cats. Behind me, the cats gave a strange shriek and called out together, "Tell Aunt Con that Polly Grundy is dead." That did it. I sprinted for home as fast as I could. I ran in the front door and slammed it shut behind me. My roommate's head popped up around the corner of the kitchen. "What's wrong?" she asked. I stared. Now safe in the well-lit, warm comfort of the house, I began to feel a bit silly. Talking cats, Ridiculous. I'd worked too much. With a forced laugh to assure myself, I told my roommate how my wild imagination had created talking cats that told me Polly Grundy is dead. At that, the yellow cat jumped up. "Great! Now I'm the queen of the witches," she said, and was out the window. Slap. A woman was walking down the street at midnight when she heard a slap, slap, slap sound behind her. She looked around, but there was no one there. She went on walking only to again hear slap, slap, slap. Again, she looked around to find no one there. She was frightened and ran to the bus stop. The slap, slap, slap followed close on her heels. As she sat on the bus, everything was silent. When she reached her stop and got off the bus, she heard it again. Slap, slap, slap. She looked around, but there was still no one there. The woman was now terribly frightened. All the way home, slap, slap, slap. Up the stairs, slap, slap, slap. As she stood at the door to her apartment, fumbling for her keys, she saw the man in a black cloak coming up the stairs. The man looked at her strangely and said, "The heel came off your shoe." The poisoned watermelon. There was a farmer who grew watermelons in his field. Unfortunately, his farm was close to a main road, and he had a constant problem with people stealing his watermelons in the night. He was determined to stop this, and came up with a cunning idea. In the middle of the watermelon patch, he placed a sign that read, "Warning! One of these watermelons has been injected with poison." The next day, the farmer came out to survey his field, and was delighted to find that no watermelons had gone missing in the night. However, he noticed at the bottom of the sign someone had written, "Now there are two." The Bloody Vampire. The vampire went home to his castle to find a bunch of vampires waiting for him. When they saw his bloody face, they began to get thirsty and asked, "Where did you find the blood?" He answered, "I can't tell you. It's too embarrassing." The other vampire said, "Please tell us. We're so thirsty." Vampire replied, "Okay, follow me." He led them into the dark night sky, and suddenly, off in the distance, there was a big, dark tower. The vampire asked, "Do you see the tower?" The other vampire said, "Yes, we do." "Well, I didn't.